My finger was still hovering over the enter key, but the screen said sent. I stared at the monitor, waiting for the undo button to pop up. You know the one. That little lifesaver Google gives you for exactly 5 seconds before it ruins your life. 1, 2, 3. The little box vanished. I didn't scream. Screaming implies you have air in your lungs, and I had absolutely none. The air conditioning in the office was humming, the city lights of Seoul were twinkling mockingly outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, and I was sitting there, frozen, watching my life implode in slow motion. The email was supposed to be the Q3 marketing analysis for the luxury skincare line we were launching. It was addressed to the CEO. Not the marketing director. Not my manager. The CEO. Chun Doo-hwan. And the attachment wasn't the spreadsheet I had spent 40 hours perfecting. The attachment was a file named draft_v4_final_real.docs. It was my romance novel. Specifically, it was the chapter where the brooding, silver-haired corporate overlord finally corners the defiant heroine in his private elevator and tells her exactly what he wants to do to her. I felt the blood drain from my face so fast I got dizzy. I grabbed the edge of my desk, my knuckles turning the color of ash. If you have ever made a mistake so bad that you physically wanted to crawl under your desk and dissolve into the carpet, hit that like button right now, because I need to know I'm not the only one. And if you're new here, subscribe, because trust me, it gets worse. I checked the timestamp. 11:42 p.m. Maybe he wouldn't see it. He was a billionaire. He probably had an assistant who screened his emails, right? An AI filter? Something? But deep down I knew. Chun Doo-hwan was famous for 2 things, his terrifying attention to detail and the fact that he never slept. I grabbed my iPhone off the desk, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I opened the sent folder just to be sure. Just to pray that maybe, somehow, I had hallucinated the whole thing. There it was. Subject: Q3 analysis / Ruth Hunter. Attachment: his silver obsession. I put my head between my knees and tried to breathe. I was 24 years old. I had moved from Atlanta to Seoul on a scholarship, fought tooth and nail to get this internship at Chun Corp, and I had just emailed the owner of the company, a man who owned half the real estate in Gangnam, a story that was very obviously, thinly, barely veiled fanfiction about him. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I went home to my tiny apartment in Itaewon, stared at the ceiling, and replayed the moment over and over. I thought about packing. I thought about fleeing the country. I checked flight prices on Skyscanner, but my bank account laughed at me. So, the next morning, I did the only thing I could do. I put on my armor. I chose a cream-colored blouse that made my dark skin glow, tucked it into a high-waisted pencil skirt, and pulled my braids back into a severe, professional bun. I applied my makeup with the precision of a surgeon going into a hopeless operation. I needed to look competent. I needed to look sane. Walking into the Chun Corp Tower felt like walking into a mausoleum where I was the designated corpse. The lobby was all marble and glass, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and ozone. I swiped my badge. It beeped green. He hasn't fired me yet, I thought. Or maybe he wants to do it in person. I made it to my cubicle on the 14th floor without incident. I sat down, turned on my computer, and waited. Every time a phone rang, I jumped. Every time a shadow passed my desk, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened my work email. Nothing from him. Just a reminder about the cafeteria menu and a spam email about a wellness app one didn't sign up for. Maybe he deleted it without opening? Ruth. I spun around in my chair so fast the wheels squeaked. It wasn't him. It was Minji, the department secretary. She looked pale. She was holding a clipboard against her chest like a shield. Hi, Minji, I managed, my voice sounding strangled. Mr. Chun wants to see you. The office noise, the clicking of keyboards, the low murmur of calls seemed to drop away into silence. Now? I asked. Now. Top floor. She didn't make eye contact. That was a bad sign. In Korean corporate culture, or really any corporate culture, when people stop making eye contact, you're already dead. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. I grabbed my tablet, simply because I needed something to hold, and followed her to the elevators. Not the employee elevators. The private bank at the end of the hall. Minji swiped her card to call it, then stepped back. Good luck, Ruth. The doors slid open. I stepped inside. The interior was mirrored, forcing me to look at my own terrified reflection as the numbers climbed. 20, 30, 40, 50. My stomach dropped with every floor. I tried to rehearse what I would say. It was a virus. My computer was hacked. I have a twin sister who hates me. The elevator dinged at the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into his office. It was cavernous. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked the entire sprawl of Seoul, the Han River cutting through the gray city like a silver vein. The furniture was sparse, modern, and dark. And there he was. Chun Doo-hwan was standing by the window, his back to me. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him so perfectly it looked like a second skin. And, even from the back, that hair was unmistakable. Silver. Not gray from age, he was only 32, but a premature, striking silver that made him look like a sleek, dangerous wolf. I stood by the door, afraid to speak. Afraid to breathe. He turned around slowly. Seeing him in magazines was one thing. Seeing him in person was an assault on the senses. He was devastatingly handsome, with high cheekbones and eyes so dark they looked like ink. But it was the coldness in his face that froze me. He didn't look angry. He looked studious. He was holding a tablet. My heart stopped. "Miss Hunter," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, and terrified me to my core. It was the kind of voice that didn't need to shout to be heard. "Mr. Chun," I whispered. "Sir, I can explain." He walked toward his desk, a massive slab of black marble, and sat down. He placed the tablet on the desk, face up. "Sit," he commanded. Not a request. I walked across the room, my heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. I sat in the leather chair opposite him, keeping my back straight, folding my hands in my lap to hide the shaking. He tapped the screen of the tablet. "I received your financial analysis," he said. I swallowed hard. "Sir, I am so incredibly sorry. It was a file mix-up. I was working late, and I have a side hobby, and A hobby," he repeated. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes locking onto mine. He studied me like I was a fluctuating stock graph. "Is that what you call this?" He swiped a finger across the tablet. He began to read aloud. His eyes were cold, like the winter sky before a storm. He didn't just walk into a room, he owned the oxygen in it. And when he looked at Kira, she felt stripped bare, as if he could see the wanton desire she tried so hard to hide beneath her professional veneer. He stopped and looked up at me. I wanted to die. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I wanted a meteorite to strike the building right now. My face was burning hot. I could feel the heat radiating off my cheeks. "It's fiction," I squeaked. "Is it?" He raised a brow. "The character is a CEO of a conglomerate in Seoul. He has premature silver hair. He has a scar on his left hand." Doo-hwan lifted his left hand. There, just near the thumb, was the faint white line I had noticed months ago during a company town hall. Coincidence? I lied. It was a pathetic lie. He hummed, a low sound in his throat. He picked up the tablet again. "You write with a lot of passion, Miss Hunter. The scene in the elevator? Very descriptive." "Please stop," I whispered, my dignity finally crumbling. "Please just fire me, sir. You don't have to torture me. I'll pack my things. I'll sign the NDA. Just please don't read anymore." He went silent. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the hard drive in his computer. He stood up and walked around the desk. I flinched, leaning back in my chair. He stopped right in front of me, leaning against the edge of his desk, his legs crossed at the ankles. He was close. I could smell him now, sandalwood and something crisp, like expensive paper. Why do you think I would fire you? He asked softly. I looked up at him, confused. Because I sent you pornography during work hours. Hardly pornography, he corrected. It's romance. Erotica, perhaps. But the grammar is impeccable. He wasn't mocking me. I searched his face for a smirk, a sneer, anything. But his expression was unreadable. His dark eyes were traveling over my face, taking in my wide eyes, my trembling lips. I checked your personnel file, he said. You're the new junior analyst. American. Top of your class at Howard University. Your supervisors say you're quiet, diligent, and invisible. He tilted his head. But this, he tapped the tablet against his thigh. This is loud. It was a mistake, I said, my voice gaining a tiny bit of strength. I respect you, Mr. Chun. I respect this company. That story, it's just a way to decompress. It's fantasy. Fantasy, he echoed. He pushed off the desk and took a step closer to my chair. He loomed over me, and for a split second, the scene from my book flashed in my mind. The proximity. The power. Tell me, Ruth, he said, using my first name for the first time. The sound of it in his accent sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. In the story, the CEO, does he give her what she wants? My breath hitched. I haven't finished it yet. I know. The file ends abruptly on page 142, right when he has her pinned against the glass. He bent down, placing his hands on the arms of my chair, boxing me in. His face was inches from mine. I could see the flecks of gray in his iris. I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. I don't like unfinished business, he murmured. My heart was hammering so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. This wasn't happening. This was a dream. Or a hallucination caused by stress and too much caffeine. What do you want me to do? I whispered. He held my gaze for a long, agonizing moment. Then he pulled back and stood up straight, the mask of the cold CEO sliding back into place. I have a proposition for you, Miss Hunter. He walked back around his desk and sat down, lacing his fingers together. I am currently in negotiations for a merger with a European luxury brand. They are obsessed with narrative, storytelling, brand identity. My team gives me spreadsheets, data, numbers. He gestured to the tablet. You give me emotion. I blinked. I don't understand. I want you to transfer to my personal team. You will work directly under me for the duration of this merger. You want me to write marketing copy? I want you to write the narrative of this company, he said. And in your spare time, I want you to finish the book. I stared at him. Excuse me. The story, he said calmly. I want to know how it ends. Consider it a personal curiosity. I'll pay you triple your current salary, plus a signing bonus. Triple. I did the math in my head. That would pay off my student loans. That would pay for my apartment for a year. But, he added, his voice dropping an octave, there is one condition. What is it? He looked at me, and for the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just trapped a rabbit. The story, he said. You can't just make it up anymore. If you're going to write about me, Ruth, you should get the details right. The air in the room felt suddenly heavy, charged with a tension that made my skin prickle. Are you accepting? He asked. I looked at the door. I could run. I could leave right now and never look back. But then I looked at him. The silver hair, the dark eyes, the challenge in his posture. He was daring me. He was daring me to step out of the shadows and play his game. I took a deep breath. When do I start? Moving my things from the 14th floor to the penthouse suite took exactly 20 minutes, but it felt like crossing a border between two warring nations. I packed my singular cardboard box, a succulent that was barely hanging on to life, a framed photo of my mom back in Atlanta, and my lucky ceramic mug. The walk to the elevator was a gauntlet. I could feel the eyes of the other analysts burning holes into my back. In the corporate world, you don't just get promoted from invisible intern to CEO's personal shadow overnight unless something scandalous is happening. They knew. Or they thought they knew. Minji, the secretary, wouldn't even look at me when I exchanged my old badge for the new one. The new badge was heavy, black, and sleek. Access level, executive. He's waiting, she said, her voice stiff. I stepped into the private elevator again, clutching my box. My heart did that traitorous flutter thing it always did when I thought about him. Chun Doo-hwan. I had agreed to his deal. Triple salary. Finish the book. Get the details right. It sounded like a dream setup for a writer, but now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality was setting in. I had agreed to let the subject of my romantic fantasies watch me write about him. It was humiliating. It was dangerous. And God help me, it was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to my boring life. The elevator doors slid open. The office was different now. A second desk had been moved in. It was made of glass and chrome, positioned near the window, perpendicular to his massive marble slab. It was close. Too close. If I spun my chair around, our knees would almost touch. Doo-hwan was on the phone, speaking in low-toned Korean. He didn't look up when I entered. He just raised one hand, a silent command to sit. I unpacked quietly. I set up my laptop, a new, high-end model provided by the company, and connected to the server. No, Doo-hwan said into the phone, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Tell the European team that if they want to dilute the brand heritage, they can buy a startup. Chun Corp is not for sale. We are acquiring them. He hung up without saying goodbye and tossed his phone onto the desk. It slid across the marble and stopped inches from my hand. He swiveled his chair to face me. The afternoon sun caught the silver strands in his hair, turning them into a halo of light that contrasted sharply with his dark, intense eyes. Settled in? He asked. Yes, sir. Good. Your first task is in your inbox. The merger proposal from the French conglomerate, Lumiere. Read it. Tell me what's wrong with it. I blinked. You have a team of senior analysts for that. I know what they think. They think about profit margins and stock value. I want to know what you think. You understand emotion, remember. I opened the file. For the next 3 hours, the only sound in the room was the clicking of keys and the hum of the air conditioning. I forgot about the romance novel. I forgot about the weird arrangement. I just worked. I was good at this. I pulled apart their branding strategy, highlighting how their luxury pitch felt cold and exclusionary rather than aspirational. By the time I looked up, the sun had set. The city of Seoul was a sea of neon and headlights below us. I found Doo-hwan watching me. He wasn't working. He was just watching. His chin was resting on his hand, his eyes tracking my movements. Done? He asked. I think so. I sent the file back to him. He opened it on his screen. He read in silence. His face was a mask. I held my breath, waiting for him to tell me I was an idiot, that I should go back to fetching coffee. Lumiere sells status, but they don't sell a story. They're selling a velvet rope, but no one knows what's inside the club. He read my notes aloud. He looked at me. Brilliant. The praise hit me harder than I expected. I felt a flush rise up my neck. Thank you, sir. However, he said, standing up. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. It's 8 p.m. The workday is over. I glanced at the time. I hadn't realized how late it was. Oh, I should go. Not yet. He walked over to the small bar area in the corner of the office. The clink of glass on the crystal rang out. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He walked back and placed one on my desk. Whiskey? I asked. Celebration, he said. Welcome to the team. He leaned against the edge of my desk, crossing his ankles. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The boss was gone. The subject of my book was back. Now, he said softly. About the other job. I froze, my hand hovering over the glass. Right. The book. I read chapter 4 this afternoon while you were typing, he said casually. I choked on my own spit. You? What? Chapter 4. The scene where the protagonist, what did you name him? Kang, takes the heroine to a gala. Mr. Chun, please, I begged, looking down at my lap. You don't have to read it. I'll just finish it and… You wrote that he was wearing a blue tie, he interrupted. I looked up. What? A blue tie. Cerulean, you called it. He took another sip of whiskey, the liquid golden in the dim light. I never wear blue. It's fiction, I defended. You said you wanted to capture the essence of the man, he countered. He set his glass down on my desk and leaned in closer. The scent of him, sandalwood, rain, and expensive fabric, filled my senses. If you want to write about a man like me, Ruth, you need to understand the details. Blue is too hopeful. Too soft. What color do you wear? I whispered. He reached up and loosened his tie. It was black. Pitch black, with a subtle silk pattern that you could only see if you were this close. Black, he said. Charcoal. Oxblood, if I'm feeling particularly aggressive. He pulled the tie from his collar and let it hang loose around his neck. It was such a small gesture, but it felt incredibly intimate. Like he was undressing. Open the document, he said. Now. My hands were shaking as I opened the laptop again and pulled up the file. His silver obsession. Find the description, he commanded. I scrolled down to chapter 4. I highlighted the sentence about the blue tie. Change it, he said. I typed black. Good, he murmured. He moved around the desk until he was standing behind my chair. I stiffened. He wasn't touching me, but I could feel his heat radiating against my back. He placed one hand on the back of my chair and leaned over my shoulder to look at the screen. His cheek was inches from mine. If I turned my head, our noses would brush. Scroll down, he said, his voice a low rumble right in my ear. I scrolled. Stop. He pointed at a paragraph. She looked at his hands. They were smooth, the hands of a man who had never done a day of manual labor in his life, yet strong enough to crush her. Doo-hwan laughed softly. It was a dark, dry sound. Wrong again, he whispered. How's it wrong? My voice was barely audible. He brought his left hand around and placed it on the desk, right next to my hand. Look. I looked. His hand was large, the fingers long and elegant, but it wasn't smooth. There were calluses on the ridges of his palm. And there, near the thumb, was the scar. But there were other marks too. Small nicks. Roughness on the knuckles. I didn't start as a billionaire, Ruth, he said quietly, his breath stirring the loose hairs near my ear. My father was a construction worker. I worked on sites until I was 20. I built this company with these hands. Literally. He turned his hand over, palm up. Touch it. I stopped breathing. Sir, touch it. For research. If you're watching this and screaming at the screen for me to run, I get it. I really do. But curiosity is a powerful drug. And the man standing behind me was the most compelling mystery I had ever encountered. Slowly, tentatively, I reached out. My fingertips brushed his palm. His skin was warm, dry, and surprisingly rough. Contrast. That was the word. The contrast between the silk suit and the rough hands. The contrast between the cold face and the hot skin. I traced the line of his life, the calluses, the scar. He didn't pull away. He didn't move. But I heard his breath hitch, just once. A sharp intake of air. My finger lingered on his pulse point at the wrist. It was beating fast. Thump thump. Thump thump. He wasn't as calm as he looked. Rough, I whispered. Yes. I'll change it. Do it. I pulled my hand away. It felt like tearing a magnet off a fridge and typed. His hands were rough, a map of a past she didn't understand yet. Better, he said. He stood up straight, putting distance between us. The cool air rushed in to fill the space where his warmth had been. I shivered. We have a gala tomorrow night, he said, his voice back to its professional cadence, though it sounded a little tighter than before. The launch of the Jeju Resort line. You're coming with me. As your employee? I asked, turning to look at him. He was adjusting his cuffs, not looking at me. As my date. My jaw dropped. What? You need material for chapter 5, don't you? He finally looked at me, and his eyes were dark, dangerous pools. The book needs a gala scene. I'm giving you a gala scene. Mr. Chun, people will talk. The rumors are already bad enough. Let them talk, he said dismissively. I don't care about rumors. I care about the story. He walked to the door of the office. Go home, Ruth. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, a stylist will come to your apartment at 5 p.m. Don't be late. He opened the door, then paused. And Ruth. Yes. Wear red. He walked out, leaving me alone in the silent, glass box of an office, my hand still tingling where I had touched him. I looked down at the screen, at the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence. I had accidentally emailed him a fantasy, but looking at the empty doorway, I realized the terrifying truth. The reality was going to be so much better than the book. The dress arrived in a box that looked like it cost more than my entire college tuition. There was no card, no note, just layers of black tissue paper and a garment that felt like liquid sin. I pulled it out. It was red, not a polite cherry red, and not a cheerful candy apple red. It was oxblood, deep, dark, and dangerous. It was backless, with long sleeves and a neckline that plunged just enough to make your grandmother pray for your soul. I stared at myself in the mirror of my tiny apartment. The stylist, a woman named Chloe who hadn't spoken a single word to me, finished pinning my hair up. She left 2 tendrils loose to frame my face, then stepped back and nodded once. He will like it, she said. It was the only thing she said. I looked like a stranger. I looked like the kind of woman who ruined empires. I looked like the heroine in my book. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm downstairs. My heart hammered against my ribs like a fist. I grabbed my clutch, which contained my phone, a tube of lipstick, and a tiny notepad for research, and walked out the door. Downstairs, a sleek black Maybach was idling at the curb. Passers-by were stopping to stare. In my neighborhood, cars like this meant trouble. The back door opened before I even reached it. Chun Doo-hwan stepped out. If I thought he looked good in the office, I was unprepared for this. He was wearing a tuxedo. A classic black tuxedo, tailored to within an inch of its life. His silver hair was styled back, exposing the sharp angles of his face. He looked like a prince from a dark fairy tale. He stopped when he saw me. He didn't smile. He didn't say, "You look beautiful." He just stopped. His eyes swept over me, starting at my heels, traveling up the slit in the dress, lingering on the curve of my waist, and finally locking onto my eyes. The air between us crackled. It was a physical sensation, like static electricity before a lightning strike. He walked up to me, stopping just inside my personal space. "Red," he murmured. His voice was rougher than usual. "You asked for red," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I did." He reached out and adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder. His knuckles brushed my bare skin, leaving a trail of fire. "I think, Ruth, that for tonight, we need to make an amendment to the script." "What amendment?" "In the book," he said, his eyes darkening, "Kong Jae-min takes her to the gala to show her off. To display his possession. He offered me his arm. Tonight, I am not showing you off. I am arming myself with you." I took his arm. His bicep was hard as stone beneath the expensive wool. "I don't understand." "You will," he said. "Get in." The drive to the Shilla Hotel was silent, but it wasn't empty. The tension in the car was thick enough to choke on. I sat on one side of the leather bench. He sat on the other, but the space between us felt charged. I pulled out my phone to check my appearance one last time. "Stop fidgeting," he said, not looking away from the window. "I'm nervous. I'm an intern, Mr. Chun. Yesterday I was making photocopies. Tonight I'm going to a gala with the most eligible bachelor in Korea." He turned to look at me. "You are not an intern tonight. Tonight, you are my partner. You are the woman who understands the narrative of my company better than my board of directors." "Is that all I am?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He looked at me for a long moment. The city lights reflected in his eyes. "We'll see." If you've ever felt like an imposter, like you've walked into a room you definitely don't belong in, drop a comment below. Tell me I'm not alone. Because as the car pulled up to the red carpet, I felt like I was about to walk the plank. The flashbulbs were blinding. As soon as the door opened, the noise hit us. A wall of shouting photographers. Mr. Chun. Mr. Chun. Over here. He stepped out first. He buttoned his jacket with one hand, scanned the crowd with a look of utter boredom, and then turned to offer me his hand. I took it. He didn't just hold my hand. He pulled me out of the car and tucked me into his side. His arm went around my waist, his hand splaying wide against the silk of my dress, claiming me. The cameras went berserk. Who is she? Is that the new model? Look at the dress. Keep your head up, Doo-hwan whispered in my ear. His breath was hot against my neck. Look at them like you own the camera. Like you own them. I took a deep breath. I channeled the heroine of my book. She wouldn't cower. She would stare them down. I lifted my chin. I looked directly into the flashing lights. And for a second, I felt it. The power. The thrill. And the undeniable safety of being anchored to the man beside me. We moved through the entrance and into the ballroom. It was a sea of diamonds, champagne, and fake smiles. Don't leave my side, Doo-hwan commanded softly. I wouldn't dream of it, I whispered back. I don't know anyone here. Good. Keep it that way. We circulated. It was a masterclass in power dynamics. Doo-hwan introduced me simply as Ms. Hunter with zero explanation. He let them wonder. He let them whisper. I watched him work. He was brilliant. Cold, precise, and charming in a way that terrified people. He switched between Korean, English, and French effortlessly. But I noticed something. Every time a man looked at me a little too long, and in that dress, plenty did, Doo-hwan's hand would tighten slightly on my waist. A subtle warning. Mine. We were standing near the ice sculpture when a voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Doo-hwan. I didn't think you'd show up. We turned. A man was approaching us. He was older, heavier, with a face that looked like it had been eroded by years of expensive scotch and bad decisions. Doo-hwan's posture didn't change, but the temperature around him dropped 10 degrees. Director Park, Doo-hwan said smoothly. A pleasure. Is it? Park laughed, but his eyes were cold. He looked at me, his gaze raking over my body with a sneer that made my skin crawl. And who is this? I didn't know you hired escorts for company events, Doo-hwan. A bit exotic for the brand, isn't it? The silence that followed was deafening. I froze. The insult was sharp, racist, and public. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to tell him I had a degree from Howard and a brain bigger than his entitlement, but Doo-hwan moved first. He didn't shout. He didn't punch him. He simply stepped forward, placing his body partially in front of mine, shielding me. He looked down at Director Park with an expression of mild pity. Director Park, Doo-hwan said, his voice low and carrying effortlessly over the nearby chatter. It is fascinating that you have time to comment on my guest. I assumed you would be too busy explaining to your shareholders why your stock dropped 12% this morning. Park's face went red. That's a temporary fluctuation. Is it? Doo-hwan took a sip of champagne. Because Ms. Hunter is here, he gestured to me. She wrote an analysis of your Q3 strategy this afternoon. In 10 minutes, she predicted your liquidity crisis before your own CFO did. Doo-hwan turned to me, his eyes gleaming with pride. Ruth, what was it you said about Director Park's expansion plan? I found my voice. I looked at Park, then at Doo-hwan. I realized what he was doing. He wasn't just defending my honor. He was proving my worth. I said it was derivative, I said clearly. And that investing in brick-and-mortar retail while his digital engagement is down 40% is suicidal. Park looked like he had been slapped. Doo-hwan smiled. A shark smile. She's not an escort, Park. She's the smartest person in this room. And she's with me. So unless you want to discuss your bankruptcy filing, I suggest you walk away. Park spluttered, turned purple, and retreated into the crowd. I looked up at Doo-hwan. My heart was racing so fast I felt dizzy. "Did you mean that?" I asked. "Every word." He looked down at me, and the coldness vanished from his eyes, replaced by a simmering heat. "You were magnificent. You defended me." "I protect what is mine," he said simply. The words hung in the air. What is mine? Before I could process that, the music changed. A slow, heavy cello melody filled the room. "Dance with me," he said. I don't think that's a good idea. People are staring. Let them stare. I want to know how the scene ends. He took my hand and led me to the dance floor. He pulled me in close. Much closer than was appropriate for a boss and an employee. His right hand settled on the small of my back, his fingers spreading over the bare skin exposed by the dress. My breath hitched. His skin against mine was electric. We moved together. He was a good dancer. Confidence. Leading. In the book, he whispered, his lips brushing my ear, "Does Kong kiss her on the dance floor?" I swallowed hard. "No. He takes her to the balcony." "Why?" "Because he doesn't want the world to see him lose control." Doo-hwan stopped moving. We were in the middle of the floor, surrounded by hundreds of people, but it felt like we were the only two people on Earth. He pulled back slightly to look at my face. His eyes searched mine, looking for permission, looking for fear. He found neither. "Then we should go to the balcony," he said hoarsely. He grabbed my hand and led me off the floor, through the French doors, and out into the cool night air. The balcony was empty. The noise of the party was muffled behind the glass. The city of Seoul sprawled out below us, a glittering galaxy. He walked me to the stone railing. I turned to face him. He stepped close. He boxed me in against the railing, placing his hands on either side of me. "I read the rest of the chapter," he said. "You wrote that she wanted him to kiss her, that she was begging for it in her mind." He leaned down. His nose brushed against mine. "Are you begging, Ruth?" "I'm researching," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Tell me," he commanded softly. "Tell me what you want the character to do." "I want him to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "To what?" His hand moved up from the railing to cut my jaw. His thumb brushed over my bottom lip, dragging it down slightly. "I want him to stop talking," I breathed. Doo-hwan's eyes flared. "Your wish," he whispered against my lips, "is my command." And then, he closed the distance. The kiss wasn't soft. It wasn't a gentle exploration of boundaries. It was a collision. If you've ever touched a live wire, you know that jolt, that sudden, terrifying realization that you are connected to something much more powerful than you are. That was what kissing Chun Doo-hwan felt like. His lips were firm, demanding, and tasted of champagne and danger. He kissed me like he was writing the scene himself, erasing every word I had ever typed and replacing it with this reality. His hand tangled in my hair, messing up the stylist's perfect work, tilting my head back to deepen the angle. For a moment, I forgot who I was. I forgot the contract. I forgot about the merger. I forgot that I was kissing the man who signed my paychecks. I just felt. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathless. The steam from our breath mingled in the cold night air. His forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed. That, he whispered, his voice sounding wrecked, was not in the draft. I tried to catch my breath. My heart was doing gymnastics in my chest. No, it wasn't. He opened his eyes. The pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris. He looked at my swollen lips, then up to my eyes. He ran a thumb over my cheekbone. "We should go," he said abruptly. The mask was sliding back into place, but it was crooked now. "Before I do something that gets us both on the front page of the morning news." The ride back to my apartment was torture. Silent, heavy, electric torture. He didn't touch me this time. He sat on his side of the car, staring at a tablet, but he wasn't reading. I could see the screen was dark. He was just staring at his own reflection. When the car pulled up to my building, he didn't get out. The driver opened my door. I looked back at him. Mr. Chun. He looked at me. The longing in his eyes was so raw it hurt to look at. Good night, Ruth. Write that down. Don't forget the details. I stumbled up to my apartment, kicked off my heels, and collapsed onto my bed without taking off the dress. I stared at the ceiling. I was in trouble. Deep, catastrophic trouble. I wasn't just writing a romance anymore. I was living alone. And the problem with living a romance novel is that you don't know if it's going to be a happy ever after or a tragedy. The next morning, the hangover wasn't from alcohol. It was from him. I went through my routine like a zombie. Skincare. Coffee. The commute. I checked my phone on the subway. Instagram was normal. Twitter was normal. But when I walked into the lobby of Chun Corp, the atmosphere was wrong. Usually, people ignored me. Or they gave me polite nods. Today, heads turned. People were whispering behind their hands. A group of interns stopped talking the second I walked past the security gates. Paranoia, I told myself. They just saw photos of the gala. I got to the penthouse elevator. My badge worked. That was a good sign. When the doors opened, Doo-hwan wasn't at his desk. But Minji was standing there in the middle of our office, looking like she was about to be sick. Ruth, she said, her voice shaking. You need to see this. She held out her tablet. My stomach dropped. What is it? It's trending. On Naver. On Twitter. Everywhere. I took the tablet. The headline screamed in bold, black letters. The billionaire's secret script. Leaked emails reveal Chun Doo-hwan's scandalous office romance. I felt the blood leave my body. I scrolled down. It wasn't just a rumor. It was a screenshot. Screenshots of my email. Screenshots of the attachment. And worst of all, excerpts. He pinned her against the glass, the city lights of Seoul witnessing his loss of control. You're mine, he growled. The article analyzed it mercilessly. Is this the stoic CEO we know? Or is this the fantasy of his new American assistant? Sources say the two were seen getting cozy at the Jeju Gala last night. Is Chun Corp being run by a hormonal teenager? I dropped the tablet on the desk with a clatter. How? I whispered. How did they get this? I don't know, Minji said, tears in her eyes. But the board of directors is in the conference room downstairs. They called Mr. Chun 20 minutes ago. The board. The old, conservative men who cared about nothing but reputation and stock prices. They would eat him alive. And it was my fault. My stupid, reckless mistake. Where is he? I asked. Room 404. But Ruth, you can't go down there. Security is. I didn't listen. I turned and ran back to the elevator. If you're watching this and thinking, don't do it, Ruth. Stay in the safe zone. I hear you. But I couldn't let him take the fall for my writing. I couldn't let Director Park, because I knew it was him, win. I slammed the button for the 40th floor. The hallway outside the conference room was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear voices raised inside. I didn't knock. I pushed the heavy oak doors open. The room went silent. 12 men in suits were seated around a long table. At the head of the table stood Doo-hwan. He looked calm. Terrifyingly calm. He was leaning against the table, his arms crossed, looking like a king facing a peasant revolt. He looked up as I entered. His eyes widened slightly. Miss Hunter, a voice boomed. It was Director Park. Of course. He was sitting to Doo-hwan's right, looking smug. He tapped a stack of papers in front of him. We were just discussing your literary contributions to the company. Get out, Ruth, Doo-hwan said quietly. It wasn't a command of anger. It was a command of protection. No, I said. My voice shook, but I forced my legs to move forward. I walked until I was standing next to Doo-hwan. I won't let you fire him for something I did. Director Park laughed. Fire him? My dear, we can't fire the owner. But we can remove him as CEO if he is deemed mentally unfit or compromised by a subordinate. He picked up a page. This is embarrassing. Silver obsession? It makes the company look like a joke. The European merger partners are calling. They're worried about instability. It's fiction, I said. It's a draft. It was never meant to be public. But it is public, Park sneered. And the timing is suspicious. Did you leak it to trap him? To secure your position. She didn't leak it, Doo-hwan said. His voice was ice. You did, Park. IT traced the IP address of the leak. It came from your home network. The room gasped. Park's smug smile faltered. That's a lie, Park sputtered. I was protecting the company. Exposure was inevitable. You hacked a confidential employee email, Doo-hwan continued, pushing off the table and walking slowly toward Park. That is corporate espionage. That is a felony. Doo-hwan stopped right behind Park's chair. He placed his hands on the back of the leather seat. But that's not what matters right now. What matters is the narrative. Doo-hwan looked around the table, making eye contact with every board member. You are worried about the merger. You are worried about the stock price. You think this story makes me look weak. He paused. He looked at me. And in front of everyone, he reached out and took my hand. The story is trending #1 worldwide right now, Doo-hwan said. Do you know what the comments say? They aren't laughing. They are invested. He pulled out his phone and cast the screen to the massive monitor on the wall. Social media feeds scrolled by. Finally, a CEO who is human. I would buy anything this man sells if he looks at her like that. Chun Corp stock is rising? I'm buying shares just for the drama. Doo-hwan looked back at Park. The stock isn't down, Park. It's up 4% since the leak this morning. The world doesn't want a robot. They want romance. He squeezed my hand. So here is the new strategy. We don't deny the story. We don't fire Miss Hunter. Then what do? A board member asked, confused. Doo-hwan looked at me. A wicked, brilliant light danced in his eyes. We authenticate it. I blinked. What? We tell them it's based on true events, Doo-hwan said. We launch the new line as a story of passion, of obsession. We use the book as a marketing campaign. The room was silent. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was the kind of pivot only a genius could make. But, Park stammered, that would mean, you too. Yes, Doo-hwan said. He pulled me closer until my side was pressed against his. It means we have to give the audience what they want. He looked down at me. Ruth, you're not my analyst anymore. You're the face of the campaign. And officially, my girlfriend. My heart stopped. Fake dating. The oldest trope in the book. And he was using it to save his company. Do you accept? He asked, echoing the first time we met in his office. I looked at Park's furious face. I looked at the board members, who were already nodding, calculating the profits. Then I looked at Doo-hwan. He wasn't looking at the board. He was looking at me, waiting. And I realized this wasn't just business for him either. This was the only way he could keep me close without destroying us both. I accept, I said. Good. Doo-hwan turned to the door. Now, excuse us. We have a press conference to prepare for. He led me out of the room, hand in hand. We made it to the elevator before I collapsed against the wall. The doors slid shut, sealing us in. Are you crazy? I hissed. Fake dating? A marketing campaign? This is my diary, Doo-hwan. You just sold my diary to the world. He turned to me. He didn't look like a CEO now. He looked desperate. It was the only way to stop them from firing you, he said. And it's not fake. I froze. What? He took a step closer, invading my space again. The dating, he said softly. The relationship. We can tell the press it's for the brand. We can tell the board it's strategy. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered on my neck. But you and I both know, we aren't acting anymore. My breath caught in my throat. So, he whispered, leaning down. When we walk out those front doors to the reporters, don't hold back. The elevator dinged. The lobby. Through the glass doors, I could see a swarm of reporters. Hundreds of them. Cameras ready. Microphones waiting. Doo-hwan adjusted his jacket. He offered me his arm. Ready to write the next chapter, Ruth? I looked at the chaos outside. Then I looked at the man who was willing to burn his reputation to the ground just to keep holding my hand. I took his arm. Ready. Blindness. That's the first thing you notice when 1,000 cameras go off at once. It's a wall of white light that erases the world. But I didn't stumble. I couldn't. Doo-hwan's arm was a steel band around my waist, holding me upright, anchoring me to the earth. Smile, he whispered, his lips barely moving. They want a fairy tale. Give them Cinderella. We stood on the steps of Chun Corporation. The questions were being shouted like bullets. Is it true you wrote the book about him? How long have you been hiding this? Are you getting married? Doo-hwan raised his hand. The crowd went silent instantly. It was a terrifying display of power. He didn't need a microphone. He just projected that calm, deep voice that I now knew sounded even better first thing in the morning. The story, he said, looking directly into a camera lens, is based on truth. Miss Hunter saw me when no one else did. And I saw her. He turned to me. He reached up and brushed my cheek with his knuckles, a gesture so tender it made the crowd gasp collectively. She is not just my employee, he said. She is my muse. And then he kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, hungry kiss on the balcony. This was slow, deliberate. A seal of ownership stamped in front of the entire world. When he pulled away, he looked at me with eyes that were soft, smiling, and completely fake. Or were they? If you've ever had to smile when you were terrified, hit that like button. Because let me tell you, my face muscles were trembling. That was 2 weeks ago. Now, I was living in a strange, suspended reality. I was officially the girlfriend of the century. My face was on magazines. My Instagram had gained 3 million followers overnight. The romance novel campaign was a massive success. Chun Corp stock was at an all-time high, and the European merger had gone through simply because the French CEO's wife was obsessed with our love story. But inside the penthouse, things were quiet. We were living together. For security, he said. The paparazzi were camped outside my old apartment. So I moved into his actual home, a sprawling, minimalist sanctuary in Hanamdong that felt more like a museum than a house. It was 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was sitting at the kitchen island, staring at a blank document on my laptop. Chapter 12. Doo-hwan was cooking. Yes, the billionaire CEO was cooking. He had discarded the suit. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt that stretched tight across his back. He was chopping vegetables with the same surgical precision he used to dismantle his business rivals. You're staring, he said, not turning around. I'm researching, I shot back. I didn't know billionaires knew how to make kimchi jjigae. Survival skills, he said. He turned and slid a steaming bowl across the marble counter toward me. Eat. You didn't touch your lunch. I took a spoon. The stew was spicy, rich, and perfect. It tasted like home, which was confusing because this man was not my home. He was my boss. My fake boyfriend. How is the book coming? He asked, leaning against the counter across from me, crossing his arms. It's stuck, I admitted. Why? Because in the original draft, I said, putting the spoon down, this is the part where they break up. The silence in the kitchen became heavy. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to get louder. Doo-hwan's face tightened. Why do they break up? Because they're from different worlds, I said softly. Because the pressure is too much. Because she realizes that eventually, he will need a wife who fits into his world, not a writer who accidentally emailed him her diary. Doo-hwan stared at me. His eyes were dark pools, unreadable. Is that what you think? He asked. That you don't fit? Doo-hwan, look at us. You're you. And I'm just Ruth. The campaign ends next month. The contract says we stage an amicable split. I go back to the States with a nice severance package. You go back to being the Bachelor King. He walked around the island. He moved slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal. He stopped right next to my stool. And what if I don't want the campaign to end? My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I mean, he said, his voice dropping to that rough whisper that turned my knees to water, that coming home to an empty house used to be peaceful. Now, the thought of it is unbearable. He reached out and took my hand. His thumb traced the veins on my wrist. You asked me once about my silver hair, he said quietly. Do you want to know the real reason? I nodded, unable to speak. Stress, he said. I was 22. My father died, leaving me with massive debt and a company that was crumbling. I worked 20 hours a day for 3 years. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I turned gray before I could legally rent a car in some countries. He looked down at our joined hands. The contrast of his pale skin against my dark skin. I built walls, Ruth. Thick, high walls. I decided that emotions were liabilities. That love was a variable I couldn't control, so I eliminated it. He looked up, his gaze piercing me. Then you sent that email. He let out a short, dry laugh. I read it. And I saw a man I wanted to be. A man who could feel. A man who was allowed to be obsessed. He stepped closer, moving between my knees. He placed his hands on the counter behind me, trapping me in his warmth. You didn't just write a story, Ruth. You woke me up. I felt tears prick my eyes. This was the speech. This was the moment in the movie where the music swells. Doo-hwan, I whispered. Don't write the breakup scene, he commanded softly. Write something else. Like what? Write the part where he asks her to stay. For real. I stared at him. Are you serious? I have never been more serious in my life. He leaned in. His lips brushed mine, featherlight. A promise. A question. And then his phone rang. It wasn't just a ring. It was the harsh, blaring tone reserved for emergencies. He pulled back, a look of annoyance crossing his face. He glanced at the screen. His face went pale. Paler than I had ever seen it. What is it? I asked, sensing the shift in the air. He answered the phone. Yes. He listened for 10 seconds. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. I'm coming, he said. He hung up. The vulnerability was gone. The wall was back up. He was the CEO again. Cold. Distant. Doo-hwan. I reached for him. He pulled away. He wouldn't look at me. We have a problem, he said, grabbing his car keys. What happened? My mother, he said. She's back in Seoul. I froze. In the research I had done, and the gossip I had heard, Chun Doo-hwan's mother was a ghost. She had left the family when the company almost went bankrupt. She was formidable, cruel, and obsessed with bloodlines. She saw the news, Doo-hwan said, putting on his coat. She saw the engagement rumors. She's at the company HQ. She's calling an emergency shareholder meeting to vote on my competency. Because of me? I asked, my voice small. He stopped at the door. He looked back at me. There was pain in his eyes, deep and agonizing. She has a document, he said. An old clause in my father's will. It states that the CEO cannot marry a foreigner without unanimous board approval. If he does, he forfeits his controlling shares. My hand flew to my mouth. But we aren't married. We aren't even really engaged. She doesn't care about the truth, he said. She cares about power. She's going to use you to take the company from me. He opened the door. Stay here, Ruth. Don't answer the phone. Don't go online. I have to go handle this. I can help, I said, standing up. I can talk to her. No. His voice cracked like a whip. You cannot go near her. She will destroy you. He looked at me one last time. It looked like a goodbye. I have to choose, he whispered, more to himself than to me. The company, or the narrative. And then he was gone. I stood alone in the silent, expensive kitchen. The kimchi jjigae was getting cold. I looked at my laptop. The cursor blinked at the end of chapter 12. He asks her to stay. But how could I stay if my presence cost him everything he had built? I sat down. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I knew what I had to do. I knew how the story had to end. If I loved him, if I really loved him, I couldn't let him lose his empire for me. I had to be the one to break the spell. I opened a new email draft. To Chun Doo-hwan. Subject: The ending. I started to type. Tears hit the keyboard, blurring the letters. I wasn't writing a romance anymore. I was writing a tragedy. I didn't take the oxblood dress. I didn't take the diamond earrings he gave me for the press tour. I didn't take the black Amex card. I packed exactly what I came with, a slightly dying succulent, a framed photo of my mom, and my laptop. I sent the email at 4 a.m. Subject: the end of the story. Body: you were right. Emotions are liabilities. I won't let you lose your empire for a chapter that was never supposed to be written. Goodbye, Doo-hwan. Walking out of that penthouse felt like tearing my own heart out of my chest with rusty pliers. The elevator ride down was silent. The lobby was empty. I took a regular taxi to Incheon International Airport. No Maybach. No driver. Just me and the cold, gray dawn of Seoul. If you've ever had to walk away from the person you love because you knew loving them would destroy them, you know exactly what the air inside an airport feels like. It feels thin. It feels like it's not enough to keep you alive. I sat at gate 32, staring at my ticket. Seoul to Atlanta. One way. Boarding was in 30 minutes. I wrapped my hands around a paper cup of bitter coffee, trying to stop them from shaking. I kept checking my phone, half hoping, half dreading that he would call. But the screen remained black. Of course it did. He was a CEO. He was practical. He had read my email, done the math, and realized I was right. The variable had been eliminated. Breaking news coming live from Chun Corp headquarters. The voice came from the TV mounted on the wall of the departure lounge. I looked up. My breath caught in my throat. It was him. Chun Doo-hwan was standing at a podium in the main press room of his company. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. But he stood tall. Behind him sat the board of directors. And to his right sat an older woman with steel gray hair and a face made of stone. His mother. I stood up, walking toward the TV like a moth to a flame. Other travelers were stopping to watch, too. Mr. Chun, a reporter shouted. Is it true that the board has called for a vote of no confidence due to your violation of the family bylaws? Doo-hwan gripped the sides of the podium. He looked straight into the camera. It felt like he was looking right at me, through the miles of fiber optic cable, right into my soul. There is a clause, Doo-hwan said, his voice steady. Written by my late father. It states that the CEO of Chun Corp must prioritize the purity of the family line above all else. It forbids marriage to a foreigner without unanimous board approval. The crowd in the airport murmured. My mother, he gestured to the stone-faced woman, has invoked this clause. She has given me a choice. Renounce the woman I love and keep my company. Or choose her and lose everything. I covered my mouth with my hand. Don't say it, I begged silently. Just choose the company. Be the ruthless king I wrote you to be. Doo-hwan paused. He looked down at his notes. Then he physically closed the folder in front of him. I have spent my entire life building this company, he said softly. I sacrificed my youth, my sleep, my happiness. I thought power was the only thing that kept me warm. He looked up again. His eyes were burning. But then I received an email. A ripple of laughter went through the press room, but Doo-hwan didn't smile. I read a story about a man who was brave enough to break the rules. And I realized. I was jealous of a fictional version of myself. He let go of the podium. He unbuttoned his suit jacket. You want company, mother? You want the title? The chair. He reached into his inner pocket. He pulled out his ID badge, the black executive card that opened every door in Seoul. He tossed it onto the podium. It landed with a loud clack. Take it. The room erupted. The board members jumped to their feet. His mother's jaw dropped. I resign, Doo-hwan said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Effective immediately. I am liquidating my personal assets. I am walking away. You can't, his mother shrieked, standing up. The stock will tank. The European merger is contingent on you. I know, Doo-hwan said calmly. It seems the market values the narrative more than the bylaws. If I leave, the company collapses. If I stay on my terms. He leaned into the microphone one last time. And my terms are simple. The clause is abolished. And I am going to get my girlfriend. He turned and walked off the stage. The feed cut to the news anchors, who were screaming in confusion. I stood frozen in the terminal. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. He did it. He actually did it. He played the ultimate game of chicken with his own legacy, and he won. But he didn't know where I was. I hadn't told him. I grabbed my bag. I had to go back. I had to. Final boarding call for Flight 802 to Atlanta, the intercom announced. I turned away from the gate. I started to run. I ran past the duty-free shops. I ran past the security checkpoint. I needed to get to a taxi. I needed to get to him. I burst through the arrival doors into the main atrium of the airport. And then I stopped. Because he was there. He was standing in the middle of the arrivals hall, surrounded by 4 breathless security guards who looked like they had been sprinting. He was wearing the same suit from the press conference, but his tie was gone, his collar was open, and he was scanning the crowd with frantic, desperate eyes. "Doo-hwan!" I screamed. His head snapped toward me. The relief that washed over his face was so profound it almost knocked me over. "Ruth." I didn't care about the people watching. I didn't care about the security guards. I dropped my bag and ran. He met me halfway. He didn't just hug me, he collided with me. He lifted me off the ground, burying his face in my neck, holding me so tight I couldn't breathe. "You idiot," he whispered into my hair. "You absolute idiot. You tried to leave me. I was trying to save you." I sobbed. He set me down but didn't let go. He framed my face with his hands, his thumbs wiping away the tears. "You think I want a kingdom if the queen isn't there?" he asked. "I told you, Ruth. I don't like unfinished business. And we are nowhere near the end." "But the board, your mother." "They folded," he said, a ghost of a smirk appearing. By the time I got to the car, the stock had dropped 12%. My mother called. She agreed to everything. "The clause is gone. I'm still CEO." He rested his forehead against mine. "But none of that matters. I tracked your phone. I broke about 15 traffic laws getting here. Because I needed to ask you something about the final chapter." I sniffled, laughing through the tears. "What? What happens to the hero?" "No," he said softly. He reached into his pocket. The noise of the airport seemed to fade away. The world narrowed down to just the two of us. He dropped to one knee. A collective gasp went through the crowd around us. Phones were out. People were filming. This was going to break the internet again. Doo-hwan pulled out a small black velvet box. He opened it. Inside sat a diamond that was simple, elegant, and timeless. "I need to know," he said, looking up at me with those dark, devastating eyes. "Does the heroine say yes?" I looked at him. My accidental email. My billionaire boss. My research partner. My love. I smiled, and it was the realest smile of my life. "She says yes," I whispered. "But only if she gets to write the vows." He laughed, a pure, joyous sound I had never heard before, and slipped the ring onto my finger. He stood up and kissed me. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a draft anymore. This was the final copy. 6 months later. The bookstore in Gangnam was packed. The line wrapped around the block. I sat at the table, a stack of hardcover books in front of me. The cover was beautiful, a silhouette of a woman in a red dress and a man in a black suit, standing on a balcony. Title: The CEO's Accidental Love. Author: Ruth Hunter. I signed the last book for a weeping teenager and handed it back. "Thank you," she squealed. "I love the ending. It's so romantic." "Thank you," I smiled. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Warm. Familiar. I looked up. Doo-hwan was standing there. He was wearing a casual sweater and jeans, holding 2 coffees. He looked younger, happier. The silver hair was still there, but the stress lines were gone. "Ready to go?" he asked. "Almost." I stood up, grabbing my bag. He took it from me naturally, intertwining his fingers with mine. The ring on my finger caught the light. As we walked out of the bookstore, the winter air hit us. It was cold, just like the night I sent the email. But I wasn't cold anymore. You know, Doo-hwan said as we walked toward the car. I was thinking about the sequel. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? What's the plot? He opened the car door for me, leaning in to whisper in my ear. The billionaire retires early. They bought a villa in Italy. And they spend the rest of their lives doing research. I laughed and kissed him. I'll start the draft tonight. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If Ruth and Doo-hwan's journey made you believe in accidental miracles, please give this video a like. And if you want to see what happens in the next story, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Let me know in the comments, would you have sent the breakup email or would you have fought for him? I'll see you in the next video.